I work for an attorney who, Keith Nordick, which is how I met many people in this room, I think once. And the first time I was an undergraduate intern, and he took me to Angola for this case that I know you're working on, where like the parole eligibility thing. And I went into this room, and then after we left, he was like, "So how does it feel?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You were in a room by yourself with me with all these convicted murderers and rapists." And I just couldn't believe it, because I saw the human element of all the people in the room, and I just never would have thought like, oh, that's, you know, because we have perceptions in our head. We believe that the public puts this perception of a monster, and that's actually a bad thing to say, like, oh, because, you know, you believe you can freak people out. But I do think that in the end, we do have to, there are victims that in the end, they have a life sentence themselves. They had to go to the hospital and endure a very invasive forensic medical exam. Sometimes the hibernation comment, like they are in hibernation, they have flashbacks, they have PTSD. And I think that as bad and as traumatic, like, you know, things are for your families and all of us sign up for that, we do have to remember that in the end, victims are having these same issues too. And sometimes they can't transition to survivor because of the things, and it takes a lot of work. So the victims, when I'm going to the legislature and like trying to oppose these increases, you know, there are the victims who, unfortunately, they've taken their own lives. They've done things. So as much, like, we have to keep that in mind. And I think the ones that where ultimately they heal the most is when somebody comes up and they say, "I take full responsibility." There's never any excuse. It's just, this is what I did. And that's their goal, is to seek forgiveness.
You know, victims, I believe that victims, you know, I did something I had no business doing, and I pray for my victim daily. I mean, because I did something I had no business. And I understand that part, because after reading and researching, that the victim is going through the same thing that I'm going through, except the victim is not on the registry. But that victim still has to relive that event. So I absolutely understand that. You said, well, you know, I really talked to you because you took responsibility for your action. Well, once a person takes responsibility, I can't go back and change. If I knew what I knew now, I probably never would have went in the French Quarter, you know? But the thing about it is, it happens, but what do you really want people to do? Victims get lost in the shuffle, because victims, they have no say-so. That the victim could say, you know what, I take his apology and I'm ready to move on, because I want to get rid of this too. And two people, you know, come together and do it, even with mitigation and reconciliation with victims and all that. It's very, very rare for a sex offender to be able to face the victim and actually take it away. In fact, what happens is the father, the children, the grandchildren, everybody take that to their grave. Nobody ever forgives.
Do hold on to this, but what if, and I want to know, and sadly, oftentimes it has nothing to do with the victim. It has everything to do with what the offender was going through at the time. And there is no apology that's going to be enough, you know, to really explain it, and to really heal it. So he or she is responsible for their own healing, as is the person who committed the offense. Yeah, and restorative justice programs, when we can bring them together, when both parties want to, and it works well, it's wonderful. But we can't rely on it. So I think that's one of those places where we can put faith out there.
That's good. They only seem to have that program, I think, if you're still in jail.
In
the
jail.
Victim Offender Dialogue, is that what it's called, like at the DOC?
Well, you know, right now what the law is, you know, you're not supposed to have any contact with the victim.
What I envision is a system where we also have more victim input. You know, I went back and I was looking at this thing that Representative Smith did about parole, or you might know more about it. I don't know if it was parole eligibility for those with sex offenses.
Yeah.
And I'm of the position we can't start one place and then jump all the way and say no, we want, because it doesn't work.
Right.
But if we start and go to the table and say, okay, what if we allow for parole eligibility with the unanimous by the parole board with victim consent? It's going to pass. because you have that safeguard. Now, how often is it going to happen? Maybe not that much, but you have to start like that. And then from there, go back and say, okay, maybe we don't need victim consent. Like, you can't, but I think that having more input with victims, because a lot of victims, they just want somebody to acknowledge, no buts. I did this to you. I went to the French Quarter, I shouldn't have, and I did this to you. The end. No buts. No, well, this is what I was thinking. No, I was on drugs. No, I did this. I'm sorry. I ask for your forgiveness. And you have to be okay if that survivor. Because in the end, people are on the registration. Has false accusations happened? I'm sure. But, it's not for the crime they may have done. It's the crime they committed, And I think that that's where if we have more victim input, some victims want to forgive, because forgiveness isn't for that other person. The forgiveness is for themselves. And most victims, that's when they're able to heal. So if we have more input with victims, I think that legislation will get passed, because we're okay if victims are at the table giving us permission as legislators to say this is okay.